Tessa, thank you so much for being here. Really excited to talk with you today. First, let's just start with hearing a little bit more about your journey to how you got here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've heard wonderful things about you from a mutual friend of ours, Asher. So I'm super excited to be here today. Um, a little bit about me. Recently I saw on LinkedIn somebody say that like as their roles and careers expand, they forget to kind of like pay due respects to like where they started. So I've like been thoughtfully thinking a lot about that. So tell me if this is way too long, but I think it kind of adds also for people trying to get into partnerships and generally, um, I hope it will be helpful for somebody. So total college dropout here. I spent about 2 years at a really, really small private school. I thought I wanted to do graphic design for the rest of my life and then realized that at 20 something, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. So, made my parents really not very proud and made the decision to stop. So, I started um, working at the flagship Nordstrom downtown store in retail, and that's where I first like found my love of retail.
Yeah.
I'd always been like an ultimate consumer, but this was like the first time that I married like a selling job with also this retail component to it. So that also is where I worked on the floor there for maybe 5 years. That's also where I learned like how important a personal book is or like a network, because at Nordstrom, if you don't create a network, you're not going to have repeat customers. And so it was just this, as I look back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the amount that they teach you foundationally for, other things that you may be wanting to go do in the rest of your life. I find that I continue to go back to like the customer is always right. And that's what they always, Nordstrom return policy, like all of these things that at the time I was just on commission trying to make money. But now I'm like, oh wow, yeah, there's like a bigger thing that I now can take towards what I do. Um, After that, I was so tired of the retail grind. I went into management a little bit, but it just wasn't for me there. So a friend of mine, Courtney McFarlane, was a marketer at Avalara, and she said that her dad may be on to something really interesting. Scott, who is still the CEO to this day. And I said, okay, I've never been in software sales. I have no idea what Salesforce is and how to use it or what a cold call is. And because of my, commission sales background, they were interested in having me do just like ground floor, like SDR cold call. I'm making like 150 calls a day to people that don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
And that is where like the foundation of my hustle, I have my hustle neon
hmm
sign
So,
in the back, um, thick skin, understanding the importance of knowing your product, like from front to back, so that you can have these like really important, thoughtful conversations with merchants and partners. And that's where I first started getting into e-commerce, where I'm like, oh, retail and e-commerce, direct to consumer, like, okay, if you're not buying it in store, then, it makes sense. And at that time, that was like mid 2010, where like this was just like all very innovative and revolutionary. And people were putting more effort and money into, like their strategy there. So I cold called for 9 months and then I got really lucky. And I think that's important to acknowledge where you get lucky.
right.
And in this case, I had a mentor who saw just kind of that hustle. And so he had this, I vividly remember sending the resume of my dad where he's been in BD and sales for his whole life. And I'm like, channel development manager, like this looks really good. Like I think like with all the things I'm doing, I could do this, but they're looking for 8 years experience, software selling, all these things. I have I have none of that. But I went through the interview, I got it, and that was how I met Asher. So him and I were on the same team, and we were the founding like channel development manager group at Avalara. And of course, people had 10, 15, 20 years tenure over me at the time. So it was really like also an important thing I always say is like, don't worry, just ask as many questions as you possibly can. And that was just really my learning role, where I worked with very, they weren't small, but they were focused on small business commerce. So like when Yahoo Stores was like a big platform,
Right.
3D Card, or what now is Ship for Shop. So I just kind of like started working these small e-commerce partnerships. And then they handed me what at the time nobody knew was iCongo or Hybris. So this is like pre-SAP acquisition, right when like Demandware was like the hot retail commerce platform and everyone wanted to be on it. And they handed me that, and I had no background on like business plans. What do you do on site? Anything really. It was just like learn as you go. And luckily at Avalara at the time, the leadership there was just so helpful to, just kind of like lean into me and really help kind of grow where I'm at today. So I did that. We won Hybris Partner of the Year. We did all these amazing things. And then I really wanted to focus primarily on SAP. So this was post Hybris acquisition. So I owned and moved from e-commerce into the ERP space. And I quickly realized I never wanted to wear like a blue jacket ever again. And like, as you know, if you've ever worked in that ecosystem, no offense to anyone in there, it's just not my vibe. So I quickly moved back over to business development and ran at the last portion at Avalara all of our strategic embedded partnerships. So that's when Avalara is embedded into like a Shopify experience. So I focused a lot on merchant experience and like heavy adoption. So at Avalara, the big thing is like protect your moat. And so we protected that moat by literally embedding, and they still do, the product into a more important, not, I should say more important product, but a larger product when it comes to the consumer, so that it's just already ready to go. So I did that, worked with Wix, Shopify, BigCommerce specifically in that tenure, and that's how I got to know BigCommerce. So I moved over there August of 2021, the day that they went public. Was my first day.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've technically gone through 2 IPOs, but I would not consider the second one having anything to do with me. So, but yeah, I ran the agency team there for the Americas for the last 2.5 years. And so what that means is essentially BigCommerce has an insanely amazing and large community of agencies that actually refer like 60% of the business into BigCommerce. And so it was like a very well-oiled machine. And really it was about like how to scale it to the next level, how to continue to go to those enterprise customers. They really wanted to, as you can see in all of their PR.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that that's what they're trying to do, even not working there anymore, is to really go into the enterprise market and make a name for themselves. But I left, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I came across like a once in a lifetime opportunity to work at a startup within a large company called Amazon. And so I wanted to go back to like that Avalara. I was like employee 170 at Avalara. So I wanted to go back to that. Like, we are building this as we are flying. Everything is changing every hour. Like, go build a team, but we have no idea what you're building the team for, type of thing. For the 6 months I was kind of talking to the manager, I didn't even know what the product was. It was still like totally under wraps. Nobody could talk about it. So my first day was really like my first day understanding what the product was, like what we were going to be doing. And so the product is Buy with Prime, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but essentially we are, for the first time, marrying like your pure Amazon strategy with your D2C strategy. And there's a lot of thoughts around that, but this is the first time that you can essentially marry the two together. If you are a merchant, you can actually just adopt the Buy with Prime button or widget on your website, and you can offer your merchants free 1 to 2 day shipping, right from your own direct to consumer site instead of through Amazon. So I'm owning the agency team here. So doing something very similar, but more of a startup and from scratch type of thing. I know that was long. I'm sorry.
No, it is very cool. It's funny. I must have just read about this week. The
Yes, it's been
biodiversity.
everywhere this week.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because I'm like, oh yeah, I know about that. That's super cool. Like I think I read about it all this week, and like amazing. I'm excited to talk more about that. But one thing I have to ask you first, just starting out about the Nordstrom stuff, because I think it's very interesting, especially around this concept of repeat customers at a business
Oh
like.
yeah.
I'm familiar with the Nordstrom store in Seattle, not that far away either. And I
Yeah.
think like in high-end retail, there is like if for the folks that aren't familiar, like there is like this kind of one-to-one relationship management esque experience with the kind of like the higher end brands, and you have to like it's definitely a two-way thing, where like there's the relationship manager wants good customers, but also like the customer needs to get a good relationship manager because they want to get access to like the limited
Yeah.
goods and stuff, right? Like I would love to just. It's got nothing to do with this with partnership at a high level. Well, it's got a lot to do with you, but
Oh, it does. It
yeah, I'd
totally
love to
ties back.
understand how that dynamic works.
Yeah. So I don't know if it still exists. I'm assuming it does, but they had something that was called a personal book. And so when they ask you like for your phone number or your zip code or your like name, ultimately what they're doing is they're adding you to their personal book. And what that does is the person who is working there can actually see your transaction. So similarly to like how we create milestones in messaging for merchants or for partners through like one-to-many outreach or, whatever you want to do with the data, I went in and saw, like, oh my gosh, Ty is buying this t-shirt like 70 times a year. Like, I'm going to go make sure that he knows every time like a new one comes out. And you could actually, I'm just giving all of their secrets away too. You can actually like set alerts for when things come in
Really?
or reminders to follow up. And so I quickly realized that, we have a sales number and there you're only on a like base hourly. So if you're not commissioning, then you're not making like, I don't know, 30 grand a year, maybe less. So you just learned one, you had to find like similarly to a partnership, you would have to find those that one are going to give and take, but also there's a ton of opportunity, whether it's a total addressable market or whatever they're selling. In this case, it's like and I worked in kids wear, so I'm like, she's got
Yeah.
4 kids that are all in private school. She's the CFO of drugstore.com. She was one of my best customers. And I know that she buys things for school, like school uniforms, and she buys them in bulk. And so I want to make sure that she is mine. And there's also this really cool dynamic between salespeople there where they know that they're yours. Like, hey, Tessa, Dawn's here, go grab her. Or, hey, your customer's there, because we got to know them. They were there constantly. I mean, so much that you would like get to know their card number because they were like always there,
Yeah.
right? And so it was just like a lot of them became family. I still talk to a lot of the customers that I serviced at the time. One is he was like one of the head or he started like Krispy Kreme, and he just has become like a really cool mentor. But it just started by he had 5 kids and they lived in Idaho where there wasn't a Nordstrom, and so I would just ship them things. So
Wow.
just finding those like really either like key people or looking at their profile as you would do to a partner and be like, okay, these are my 3 priorities, or like I'm going to ship them things to Idaho because they don't have a Nordstrom near them. Great. I'm going to put them top of my list because I can service them better than anybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it and I've been thinking a lot more about it. Just
Yeah.
like, wow, this all transfers,
Totally.
all of it.
And my wife and I are in a similar position with a few folks because, like, there's, like if you're in Seattle and also, or like in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of places that don't have stores here, like a lot of brands don't have stores here. And so, like,
Yep.
yeah, we've got a contact from a store in Hawaii that will email us every once in a while, give us a
Yep.
call and stuff. And so, I mean, there is like in this very streamlined retail experience world, I think there's even more of an opportunity for brands that do a
Oh,
really good job of that stuff. Like like, don't get me wrong, I love Amazon and I love just jumping on and buying my groceries and like,
yeah.
I'm like a whale customer, but like when you have an experience with the sales associate like that, it is like something really magical because it stands out
And
from
that's
everything else.
it's so funny you say that because I have an Amazon merchant who I met like really early on, Matt. Oh, I'm going to totally butcher his last name and he's going to text me right after he listens to this. But Matt Jubancic, he is like the CEO and founder of Guardian Baseball. And he actually started his like career also in retail, had a
Mm.
bunch of, brands, and he still obviously is in retail. But he like kept saying to me, like, you treat people differently. Like you have to have a different background. Like you weren't born to Amazon. And so I think about that a lot too, because there's this perception of Amazon that there's no like personal, like they put the customer first, but as far as like the conversations that we can have with merchants one-on-one, or just like the fact that him and I now have a personal relationship, I've tried very hard. I feel like that's kind of like one thing I would love to see more of is like, let's talk to sellers. And our team, I think, is actually doing that more than anyone because we need the feedback from the merchant to build the best product we can.
Yeah.
And so I just keep trying to tell myself, like, let's like have more of these Nordstrom-esque conversations, and it's only going to pay off, especially with sellers. So, they'll do more with us. So
Amazing. Yeah, it's a extremely relevant. And tell me, like, because I know in the retail and merchandising world, you do tend to have some partners and connections with brands and things like that. Like brands will come into the stores, especially for a flagship store. I'm
oh
sure they
yeah.
come in and like talk to the team and prep you on new seasons and releases. Like, how did that? How does like because they're the partnerships people, I guess, like, or they're the sales
Yeah.
people. I don't know. But like, tell me how that dynamic works.
Well, John Nordstrom has passed away, obviously, but he would walk the floor every day with all of the brothers. So he would start at floor 5, and he would go around and around every morning before the store opened, like check what it looked like. Sometimes he would have vendors with him if there was like a new launch that was about to happen. But yeah, we had buyers on the ground every day. They continue to go on the ground every day. They would have, and I loved that because, and this is kind of perhaps like if you were to, like, this would be leadership coming down to get your feedback on like, a product that you're about to launch. And so the leadership being the vendors and also, the founder of Nordstrom coming in and saying, hey, how's this brand doing? What do you think? Should we fold it different? And so it was like a really collaborative, like whether it's merchandising or you need to get rid of these socks, like nobody likes them, or let's get these pants back in for back to school because all of the kids love, this one pant. And so it was really every day collaborative. You'd
Wow.
have somebody else coming in, either with a vendor or the buyers from upstairs, and they were just on the floor above. So we'd see them constantly
That's
reinventing, rethinking.
Yeah, it's really smart. It's amazing. And so, well, shifting gears, I'd love to talk a little bit about, obviously you're doing kind of the cold call sales thing, and I think that's like the rite of passage for many people in our space, right? Like, I've definitely been there, and I think anyone who's got that kind of hustle mentality has probably done some cold call sales in the past, and they're like, well, whatever I'm doing now is awesome. Like that, like
Exactly.
this job I'm doing
Exactly.
today is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is a grind. But I'd love to talk about like when you first got into partnerships and you're in the SAP ecosystem. I haven't ever really touched that ecosystem. And I'd love to hear like as it's a while back now, but like what your impression of partnering with SAP was. Anything that like stood out uniquely about
Hey,
them and their channel and ecosystem, and maybe like because I know it was a company that then got acquired by SAP, so like maybe what that even was like as well.
wild. So I owned, best way to say this is like I own like the omni-channel SAP partnership. So I had like relationships with Concur. I
Uh-huh.
had SAP Business One. I had SAP ECC. I had Hybris, which is now, I don't know what they renamed it. And then what else? SAP HANA. So every either acquisition they made or area of business in which we plugged in tax, I owned that entire strategy, which was quite a bit too much, I think, for one person, as they're all different organizations. They're all different CEOs. Like SAP has, a billion different, similar to Amazon, where it's like everyone is very segmented. It's not like many people are talking to each other at different, like Concur and Hybris obviously are never talking to each
Yeah.
other. So it was, I had a plan and I had to basically start from scratch with each individual kind of like work stream or company. I would say you just have to find your champions. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I now work with some of the people that I did have as champions over there, but ultimately it's especially because we're selling like a tax technology. It wasn't like I was the sexiest conversation in the room either, which was like super unfortunate. I tried my best, but it's like you're not only something, well, I think that every customer should have a tax automation service for their own benefit and well-being, but like it's not number one on most people's lists. It's like innovation and, like supply chain and all of these other things. So you had to find people that were super interested in some ways. So I found Nelson, who loved Avalara because it was like this pre-IPO at the time. He like really wanted to understand like how we were getting capital and funding and like learn about our CEO and all of this. And so I used that as an in for him, like a trade almost, right? At that time, because they have so many competing priorities. So that was really what I had learned about SAP is you got to find champions. And then you really have to understand, especially if you're launching an app, which is a total nightmare. Sorry, SAP. I feel like you would say that anyway. And so you just have to prioritize like the one thing that's going to get you into the ecosystem, which is that app, and then let the app kind of work for itself. So we did a lot of events, which, Avalara was very known for a period of time, and a lot of networking through merchants. So that was always my way of getting in the door. Was we had some huge SAP merchants, very important merchants to them. And I would leverage those relationships to kind of say, hey, we need to move this forward because X merchant, is waiting. And so trying to bring it back to the customer as much as I could was definitely a way to navigate SAP land.
Yeah, and it's good. It's interesting because like these kind of strategic partnerships are always tricky to navigate. I feel like for any partnerships person and also anyone who's running a partnerships team as well, it's like it's a long-term bet, and everyone's always asking for us to build the integration. They're always asking for us
Always.
like do the marketing stuff. And so it's good to hear you say, hey, like it's good to hear you say that, hey, the like the integration and the marketing stuff was actually important in order for things
Yeah.
to work. Because anyone from my team who's trying to get integrations built or getting budget at the moment for marketing events will be cheering in the background.
Good.
And so like, yeah, tell me about that. Like it sounds like getting that app launched was like a
Yeah.
key touch point. But like, what kind of things worked in a strategic partnership like that? Because so few work. I'm really
It
interested
was
to hear what worked.
perfect place, perfect time. So you have this like extreme. So we were essentially the default tax provider for high-risk merchants. And so again, that goes back to like building the moat. We were always really good at always asking to be preferred or default or embedded in, so that like automatically or immediately you have a different level partnership and relationship because you are more sticky because they built you into it. So, or, you've signed an agreement that, you're going to be the top partner and, you work out the commercials there. So, we launched Levi's, we launched Adidas, we launched like very large brands, which also makes us way more sticky and harder for, a platform like Hybris to look elsewhere, just because we had, our hold on the market, as well as, we put a really great partnership deal together. But after the acquisition with SAP and Vertex have a very, very close relationship. And so we had to find those champions through our merchants. And so we did a lot of merchant case studies. We did a lot of marketing around like conversion rates and using data and taking it to SAP and really, I would say I found I would say Hybris was our in. Like, I don't think I ever really did a good job of integrating into like the beast that is SAP ECC, their primary ERP, just because we were such a small fish. But I leveraged executives that did move over to allow our CEO and C-levels to have more of a broader relationship through the SAP ecosystem. So I would say I don't think anyone has ever mastered it, or I for sure did not. But I did think that after the app, it became more real and people were more interested in partnering with us. There's like a whole certification, a lot of technical work to go into it. They like review all of your, obviously your code and all of the summary of what the app is for. And then once we did that, it unlocked a lot of additional opportunities that we didn't have before. So I would say, again, like always using your network and other channels and champions to help you, expand your relationship. I like pride myself on trying to leverage that as much as I can every single day, not only for myself, for people on my team or, whomever. But then also, putting in the work and saying, okay, we probably should do this, and prioritizing the app, and making the case internally that we need to build and show kind of the ROI to get, engineering and product also engaged and interested. So, two-prong approach, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm really interested, like, to learn more. You mentioned like embedding into some of these business units, and I'm really interested, and that kind of becoming your moat. I'm really interested in these embedded experience deals where, like, we have a couple of them already at Deal where people are embedded into our platform, or we're embedded into their platform, or maybe we're like white labeled into their platforms. And it's something that we're kind of exploring still at the moment. Sounds like that's something you've done quite a lot. Like, what are some of the things that you were looking for when you were deciding? Because it seems like they're definitely more work to start, but then very sticky once they're kicked off and successful. Like, what were you looking for, and how did you kind of open those doors? And did you receive as much pushback as I've received in the past? Get something that.
We just had this conversation, and so I'm not in business development on this side, but
Yeah,
the conversations that we're having from the Amazon perspective around like building integrations and what they're going to look like. And, some people think they're all going to look the same. And I'm like, you are in for a rude awakening when everyone wants it to look totally different than the other one. So be prepared. So primarily we looked at total addressable market. So how are we going to get the most bang for our buck? The first one being Shopify, which, has millions and millions of users. We were embedded into Shopify Plus, which was also a strategic opportunity for us to have the best brands automatically using us, which is like super great. And then we went to BigCommerce, which has, 67,000 merchants. 47,000 of those are in the US. And then Wix was the third, which has millions and millions of merchants. And so it was all about how can we get them in the door and then build a strategy. And this is really where like I got into merchant journey and like the importance of messaging in the UI and like where the button goes and, like oh my gosh, do we need to gate it here? No, we can't ask for the credit card here. So it was a totally different world that now I'm just like so obsessed with always knowing the flow. Like we have to know the flow before we go any further, because if you don't, then there's just so much that can go wrong. So, and putting the merchant first, obviously, in that flow. So we prioritize total addressable market to try to kind of push off our competitors, because at the time TaxJar was going down market and had good relationships with some of those. So our goal was like, let's land and expand into these three. And then at the same time, we offered a similar experience that wasn't embedded, but we started a free trial at the same time to see like, what's the difference, right? Like, are people okay with embedding, or should we try this more like free trial experience, which doesn't sound as scary as you know, like opt in or you have to have it. So yeah, that's hopefully that answers that question.
Does. Yeah, it does. And how did the commercials generally work for a partnership, like a professional partnership like that? Is it like, well, you tell me, how do the commercials normally work?
So each one was different. Some and it was totally based on what the best ones were when how do I say this nicely? The best ones were when they put the merchant first and were less worried about how much money they were going to make off of it and more worried about the risk that they were solving for their merchant. So it was completely dependent on, are you thinking of this as like a financial gain, and you're going to make money off of this, and you're going to show this, you know, to your board, and we need to hit this or else you're in the red and you're going to turn it off. And so that looked a lot different. And that primarily was like basically negotiating buckets of transactions that they would either pay, you know, would pay for before or after or whatever, you know, it may be. And then there are ones where the partner just wanted to own everything. Like, I don't care, especially with Wix, they have the best customer journey and experience I've ever seen. If you have not signed up for Wix, they just make it so easy, and they are obsessed with controlling the merchant experience and having it at their expectation. So they just were like, the commercials are the commercials, but we are building this exactly the way that we want it, and it's going to flow exactly how our product does, or else I'm not doing it. Like, take it or leave it. And so each one was way different depending on what the priority and like the intention of the partner. And some came to us like, hey, this embedded thing's super cool. Or, you know, we saw, you know, especially ones that had that total addressable market.
And was the embedded product something that was on the website and talked about, or was it something that was kind of like behind the scenes?
Yeah, so all three of them are visible.
Yeah.
There are many that are not, that you would never know. But all three of the ones that I mentioned, you'll see the Avalara logo through the experience, or it says powered by, you know, Avalara. Some were opt-in or out, so you actually had to like learn about Avalara to see if you wanted it or not, and that was always fun. Like, what sentences do we put here so they want to turn this on? It was like always just a big debate that always changed, right? Like the journey was always changing depending on how merchants were responding. So yes, it was visible throughout, but there were also ones where we were white labeled, or they preferred not to use our name.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I think like there's, especially in the world where people are having to like really get creative as a partnerships team now to generate like real revenue for the business. Like these kind of embedded partnerships for tech companies are really, really interesting, and still like very new for a lot of people. I think it's just like a really unique experience that you've got there.
The one thing I would say on it is, honestly, the commercials and the building was the easiest. It was making sure that you had the people, the content, and like the engine to once they were in your system. I mean, we had 36,000 merchants sign up, like
Wow.
maybe more than that, right? Like we were averaging way over 5,000 merchants that were just like signing up a month. Even sometimes we would have 5,000 in a week, depending on if we were pushing marketing or we were like highlighted in the UI. And so in order for it to work, you had to upsell them. Like, cool, because some of them did get it for free. Like,
Got it.
no questions asked. We created a commercials where the partner was taking care of it, or we had some other idea. And so if they were getting it for free, it was even more of a stress because you're like, oh my gosh, you have Fashion Nova, and right now they are getting this for free in our system. They're running millions of transactions. Like, what do we do? And so we built an entire team. They were called the coach team, where they would literally coach these people through, like, okay, get up and running. Okay, here are all the other products and services that we have that you can adopt. So that was the most fun I've ever had, like with that group of people. Shout out to the Avalara Included team at the time. But that was like where the work really started, was like, how are we making these people like return customers and they're paying us every year so that, they're not taking tech debt by, just all of these transactions that, they're getting for free.
Yeah. And I honestly could dig into that so much more, but I want to talk about the big commerce ecosystem as well. 'Cause I think, like, honestly, I think I could just talk about that for like an hour. But I know that it must have been a shift to go from participating in other people's ecosystems to like big commerce. Really, you're the ecosystem that people are participating in, especially with all
Yeah.
of these agencies. So, like, how, like, coming into that dynamic change, like, what did you spot that was different about that? And also, like, 60% of business coming from agency referrals is absolutely huge. Right? I'd love to understand, like, what were some of the things that big commerce did right that made that happen?
Yeah. So when I came in, I had like, I think the hardest thing for me was like realizing the amount of parts that go into a tech stack for somebody who has a platform. It's like, oh my gosh, I've only had to worry about one product, right? Like one technology. And now you have like SMS and their marketing strategy and like who they have on the back end for their ERP or how they want to build out their site or what theme they want to use. So it's just like, what's a theme? I don't know what a theme is, or just all of these new like platform specific conversations I had never had to have ever. So that was like the biggest oh shit moment for me. Like, I really have to lean into like this technology like platform area where I had never had to. But the beauty of partnerships is you can do it anywhere, and a lot of what you've learned can just transfer over. And so I really focused in on, okay, I'm going to learn this. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome for a little bit because my boss, Dan, like, he knows everything about everything when it comes to like the big commerce platform and just like crazy CPG stuff and just like all of these things that, it takes a while to learn. So I just focused on, okay, I had 9 people. They were regionally based, and I was going to go back to what I did best, was like, give me the number for the year. Let's go get it. And then on the other side of it, I'm going to just like fully immerse myself in this crazy, new world, which is like learning from the platform side. And ironically, I still remember a long time ago, Asher told me like, it's okay to like move around in a company, like go try BD for a while and go try marketing and like really holistically figure out like what runs the business. And so I think of all these moves that I've made essentially as e-commerce, as that business. And so now I'm like, I've got Amazon now, I got the platform side, doing tech. And so really when I started there, just leaned in on where are we at as an ecosystem, and then let me learn the other stuff, which still I'm not an expert in. I don't think it would take years and years to be an expert in everything that plugs into big commerce for a merchant and what they care about. It's a lot. So
that's super interesting. And like, tell me a little, because obviously, like, these agencies, they've got a lot of other stuff going on. Like if you're their preferred solution, then they'll recommend you to clients. But was there anything else that you did that, that encouraged that business? Were there incentives that worked or benefits, or was it really just, hey, like you had the tech that they enjoyed using? I'm always interested to hear that.
Honestly, the partnership and just like and I've worked with and known a lot of lovely Shopify people on the agency side. I have really good friends, and we all kind of agree on this, that like the amount of support that you have as a big commerce agency is unmatched. Like they dedicate so much time, money, effort, people into that agency organization. And honestly, the data shows for itself. When you sign up, you have an enablement manager, you have a solution engineer, you have a agency partner manager, you have a marketer, you just have this, like, the beauty of being a agency development manager there is like you are the CEO of your territory, and you have all of these amazing cross-functional team members, including the leadership team there that is just lovely and wonderful people that lean in on agencies so well. So I know it's cliche, but like the people and the way that they have leaned into partnerships over the years, especially, I mean, Brent loves the agency ecosystem, the CEO over there. That to me is like their like bread and butter and what differentiates themselves. I'm trying desperately to take a lot of what they have there over here. Like, we need an SE, like, you don't understand how much this helps. But like, to me, that was it. And their enablement paths that they have built for their partners is insane. Like the tracks and the certifications and the accessibility to betas for their merchants, even before the product or service is launched, they like really lean into, and I'm sure it's hard, right? Like you're maybe sharing too much before you should, but they really trust each other. And I think that's a lot of it too, is there's a lot of trust between the big commerce agency partners and big commerce.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing to hear. Like, and what are some of the other things that, like, you're at Amazon, I don't know, like, what do they call that? Like the big smile? Like, is there like I don't know, there's like the big something for all of the like big tech company, like the big blue or
Yeah. I don't
don't,
know.
is there one for Amazon? There should be, maybe we can figure one out. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
don't know.
like, so it sounds like support, for partners is something that you're like, hey, we really need to bring this across. Like, what else are like things that you've identified, either that Amazon's doing really well already and you're like, wow, that's really impressive, or things where you're like, hey, based on my experience at Avalara, at Big Commerce, at Nordstrom, these are things that I'm going to pull in and implement here.
Yeah, I think we definitely need more enablement and structure to like the experience that a partner gets immediately that is going to impact them so positively that they're going to be like, yes, I'm bought in. I think, it's just like your first introduction is so important. And so a lot of enablement work. And then, are you still there? Oh, there
I'm
you are.
here.
Sorry, you're okay. I'll start over. Sorry.
Yeah.
Your screen went black.
Oh,
I
weird.
don't know.
Weird.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, you can cut this, right?
Yeah. We'll edit
Okay.
it.
Okay. So a lot of enablement work, just like really setting the stage of, here are the tools you need to get off the ground. Here are your resources. Just like very structured kind of like package, including they get an agency development manager to kind of bring them along for the ride as well. But for us, it's really about scale. Like, how the hell do we scale this? Because, a lot of press this week, and ultimately that's our first like real introduction into a platform relationship. And I've been getting texts all day from agencies like, how do I get in? What do we do? And so I think we all had a moment of like, okay, we have to build a scalable program. And so I'm taking a lot from the scale from what we did at Avalara, and like this coach team and creating content and milestones and messaging to make a lot of it run on its own. Making sure that they have all of the relevant information that they need, but until they get to that point where they're ready to engage, or they, sent us leads or whatever, we figure out is that like baseline, at least we have something to like keep them engaged and interested. And BigCommerce did that also really well. They had a growth team. And some of those growth partner managers had like thousands of agencies, right? And so they would strategically kind of work within that book of business to like maybe put out certain things to B2C and another message to B2B, and then the top 10 they'd really like spend that time with. So we're learning really quickly that we need to scale and create a scalable solution. And so we're hiring 2 people right now to basically own that. So like drive more recruitment, drive more people into the funnel as we have more platform relationships, and we need to get specialists that know Shopify and specialists that know Wix. And it's just so different than the platform, right? Because you're only worried about one. Or here you're like, oh my gosh, like I need to know everything. And so I would say scale, enablement, and then honestly just championing internally is like my third, right? Of course, everybody says that in partnerships. Like I'm always trying to make sure people know the importance of what our partners can do for us. And so a lot of my job in the last month has just been like going around and popping into meetings and like making sure that we have a voice and we are connected to these cross-functional groups, so that, we're not left out. And then everyone's like, wait, what are we doing for agency? So that's like half of the trouble, is just like getting everybody on the partner train, especially, I wouldn't say especially here, because Amazon does a lot of partnering, and my boss was the channel chief at AWS. So he like really knows how to do this. But it's just different in this. A lot of people that we have working for us came from jobs that maybe did not work with agencies, and so co-selling and like being really afraid of like handing it over to somebody, or like having to get somebody else involved. It's just like, you're constantly like evangelizing, or just being like, I promise, like just go with me, we'll get there. So it's a lot of that right now. A lot.
Amazing. Yeah, I know that. It's so interesting. That's something that you have to do at a company that size. But obviously, like when it's a startup within a company, it makes a bunch of sense. Well, I know that we're at time, which is so sad because I wish that we weren't. But it's been an amazing conversation. We always finish these conversations with the question, what have you learned recently that you'd like to share with the people that are listening?
Yeah, I'm like so late to this book, but I'm reading Atomic Habits right now. Never read it. And personally, I just am like a goal setter. I go after it, and I'm always like, well, why am I not doing this faster? Or why didn't I get there? I just like totally forgot about it. So that to me is like the biggest learning personally and also professionally that they talk about, throughout the whole book, which is like, the goal is cool. Like keep that in mind, but like all of like the micro things that you accomplish throughout is really where like the beauty is. And like the learning and thoughtfulness and just consistency and all of that. And so I'm always focused on, we got to get this out of the way, but realizing how much I've learned while I've actually gotten there, and like being okay with like learning from that and enjoying the ride to the goal and being consistent towards that, instead of, okay, I have this on my board, like I'll get to it when I get there, but being very aware of what was put in to get there. So I've never really thought of it that way. I know it sounds so simple, but it just like something clicked in me, like, okay, like, and that even makes you want to hit the goal even more. Like, oh, I'm like on a roll. I've got this one off my list. I didn't know I needed to do that, but I'm learning from that. And so that's what I would say is like, the goal is cool. Like, great. Like if you want to lose weight or if you want to launch a new product, but the beauty really is in like rolling up your hands and being consistent throughout and
Yeah.
like learning from all of those individual milestones throughout the goal. That's
Yeah.
what I would say.
It's great. It's super applicable for partnerships, especially when you're like, the goal might be a year, 2 years out. And, all of those little milestones and unlocks along the way. And it's really what you have to be able to enjoy. Like, you might not even see your partnership come to fruition while you're at the company.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a conversation I had with an old employee 2 days ago. Like,
Yeah.
I know you're upset. You're not going to see it through, but like, look what you just went through. Like, you can take so much, So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, loved it. Thank you so much, Tessa. Amazing to chat with you. Thank you for your time. And I know people are going to love listening to this back. So thanks
Good.
from them as
Thanks.
well.
Thank you. Yeah.